Great. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for attending today's amazing discussion. So welcome to all of our guests that are here. It looks like we have some nice turnout. So excited that everyone is here. My name is Megan Anderson. I am a student at MIU. I am a student in the MBA program with Dr. Wang, studying sustainable business. So glad to be here today, along with many of my classmates that are part of the leadership and conflict resolution. And I know we have other visitors as well. So welcome to you all. We have a really exciting agenda today. We're going to be hearing from the amazing Ernie Turner, and he's going to be speaking to us for a few minutes about his experience and knowledge in leadership and transformational coaching. So if you're here to hear about that today, you're in the right place. I'm also going to quickly introduce some of our panelists today who have so kindly joined us. And before I do that, I just want to thank Dr. Wang and thank Viola for support and putting this together and arranging such a nice talk for us today. So with that being said, I just want to quickly introduce Ernie, and then you'll hear from him momentarily. So Ernie Turner is the president of LIM, or Leadership in Motion, which is a global consulting firm focused on people and business development using action, reflection, learning principles. So we get to hear about that from Ernie today. I'll just briefly say that he's lived and worked in Malaysia with the US Peace Corps. He's lived in Angola, Brazil, Italy, and Kenya as a teacher and principal with the International School Services. In the United States, Ernie co-led a major organizational change project with the New York City and Boston school system, transforming the 60 most dysfunctional elementary, middle, and high schools at that time. Then Ernie introduced this innovative approach to the Romanian school system as well that continues to this day. He has a list of extremely amazing organizations that he's engaged with, including Amex, Apple, Bear, Chase, Coca-Cola, the list goes on and on. So drawing from a lot of amazing experience. And he is an author as well and speaker. And I think everyone's going to really enjoy hearing from him today. So we look forward to that. After Ernie's done speaking, we'll go into a panel discussion. Our first panelist today will be the amazing Dr. Keith Wallace. Keith was our founding president of Maharishi University of Management and founding president of the Maharishi Ayurveda Corporation of America. These clinics then that were established throughout the United States. Dr. Wallace is currently a trustee of the MIU team of management, a co-dean of the College of Perfect Health, and the professor and chairman of the Department of Physiology and Health. And his primary focus has been on creating graduate programs to train physicians, health professionals, and wellness consultants in the Maharishi Ayurveda and integrative medicine. So we welcome Dr. Keith. We have another amazing panelist joining us today. So we'd really like to thank Dr. Laura Wagey for joining us today. So thank you, Dr. Wagey. Dr. Laura has been, serves on a board of trustees at the Wagey Foundation and is vice chairman of the board of trustees here at MIU. She's been very active in many projects at MIU. Her recent project is the renovation of our art center, and she's received an honorary doctoral degree from MIU in 2019. So I will look forward to hearing more about her background, but she was also the former deputy director of the Trade Register in Romania, the former legal counsel for the Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Romania, and has a BA in law degree from a university in Romania as well, with a master's in psychology from the MIU University with an outstanding student award, and a Doctor of World Peace from MIU as well. So thank you, Dr. Wagey, for joining us. And last but not least, we have the fantastic Rapunjay Bhargava. He's one of our teachers here at MIU. He's also the director of the MA program in Leadership and Conflict Resolution. So I've had the pleasure of studying with him as well. So hopefully I did amazing justice to our incredible team of folks here today. Ernie, I will turn it over to you, and we really look forward to learning from you. And I enjoyed getting to know you this week. So I know all the students are in for a great treat today. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Megan. It's terrific to be here. Can you all hear me okay? I forgot to make sure my volume was up enough. Megan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you just fine. Thank you, Ernie.
Terrific. Okay. So one of the reasons I'm here that maybe you don't know is through Ayako, who's behind the scenes as our timekeeper. among other things. So Ayako, I want to thank you for making this possible for me. I look at this as a learning opportunity. Every time I'm with a group, I say, what can I learn today? So I checked out each of the panelists a little bit, met two of them. Laura, I look forward to meeting you a little bit later. But I think there's a lot to be learned from the panelists and their questions that I don't know, and I don't know your questions. So that's the gift you're giving me today, is the questions. What I'd like to share with you is a little bit about the concept of shared leadership and how I got into that. LIM is an organization, Leadership in Motion, that's 35 years old. Started it back in 1986. And the reason to start it with the three other partners that I had at the time was to see to what degree we could bring the voice to multinational companies and large national companies and not-for-profit organizations to have a voice that could be heard by the politicians in the world to make a difference in our planet. And over the years, we've been able to make little footholds in that. And we've come up with a concept on leadership called shared leadership disciplines. And that's the focus of the talk today. What are they? And what makes them work? So I'm going to be sharing my screen. And here we go. Let me begin at the beginning here. And we've selected the picture of geese as sort of the metaphor for what shared leadership is all about. Geese, by nature, share the leadership. No one goose stays at the head of the flock. They rotate and they step in. When one gets sick, the others step in. So that the ability to travel is 70% more than if they were to do it alone. And so we've been looking at different metaphors for leadership, and this is the one that we've adopted because it has so much relevance to what we consider when we look at shared leadership disciplines. So what I'd like to do in the few minutes that I have, I've got about 12 minutes left, is talk to you about what are the shared leadership disciplines, and I'll share a few stories and introduce a few tools. This is recorded so you can get the tools later, and my slide deck will be available to all of you as well. The first discipline is that of connect. And Megan, you helped us get connected in your wonderful introduction. But when we're in a meeting, we need to connect not only our laptops or our phones or however we're connecting, but also at a personal level. How am I connected? Am I settled? Am I focused? Am I relaxed? How do I do that? At the professional level, are we connected to one another? At the team dimension, are we connected? At the organization, at the business, how do we really connect to the world? And obviously, from a sustainability standpoint, with COP26 going on right now, how do we connect with people across the planet? So connection is a critical part. That's where we get our energy. If we're not plugged in, we're not going to really have much of a conversation. And I know that, Megan, you had to leave your home. You lost your energy. So you're connected sitting in a car. So we have to figure out, how do we connect irrespective of what's going on? And I'd like to share a quick story about connection. And since most of my work is with multinationals and with teams, I'll share a story. A number of years ago in Singapore, I was invited to work with a large pharmaceutical company and their leadership team across Asia Pacific. The head of HR invited me to come in because they were getting a new VP as well as the head of sales and medical affairs and marketing. And it felt almost like a reverse takeover because these three were coming from a totally different company. And the design was for them to jump right into a strategy to change the business across Asia Pacific. And the head of HR said, Ernie, I need to be a part of this group, part of the team. So could you facilitate this? And I said, I'd be happy to if the incoming head of business says, okay. So I talked to him and he said, if you're good enough for Robin, you're good enough for me. So that was a warm welcome. And I looked at the design that they had, and they were going to meet in a boardroom, and they were going to start working on the strategy from the very first few minutes. And I said, wow, I don't think that's going to work. First of all, a boardroom is a difficult place to connect because it's so formal. And I think it's called boardrooms sometimes because they're often boring places because they get right into the business. So I said, could we have another room? We can't move the boardroom table. So they gave us the basement. We were at the Ritz-Carlton in Singapore. So we went from the 32nd floor down to the basement, pre-planning, getting it ready. And we had 14 chairs, all in a circle. We brought in some lights, we brought in some plants, and changed the agenda. The first day, all we did was connect. We told stories. We got to know who was in the room. And at the fourth day, on the Thursday, we brought in the people who were going to change the strategy so they could get their fingers around it and connect to the strategy. On the fifth day, when we were leaving, the head of the region, an Indian who was very open to learning, said, look, this would never have happened if we jumped in the first day in the boardroom and got right into the strategy. We didn't connect. But now that we did, everything is really starting to click. We have a success possibility. Contracting, another very important part of the disciplines. By the way, they're all C's. Contracting I've told people, 20% of our difficulties are because of bad health. 80% are probably due to poor contracting or no contracting. And contracting is getting agreement around the rules of engagement. And that happens at multiple dimensions, at the personal, person to person. This is true of personal relationships as well as business relationship, at the professional dimension, the team dimension, the organization dimension, business dimension, and obviously at the global sustainability dimension. We have to have agreements. What are we committing to? What are our offers? What are the requests? What do we commit? What will we do? The story I have here happened in the Philippines a few years ago. One of our coaches in the Philippines was working with the head of the finance team. There was a small team, only 5 people. But 2 of the people on that team had not been talking to each other for a year, and they met every week. They sat on opposite sides of the table, apart from each other, so they wouldn't look at each other. And you can imagine the dynamics in that team. So the coach said, let's go for a walk and talk. It's one of the simple tools that we have, and be glad to tell any of you who are interested a little bit more how to do it. But it's very simple. You go on a walk, but you walk in pairs in the group, so you're far enough apart to have a private conversation. And every 6, 7, 8 minutes, depending on the time, you rotate. So it came time to rotate, and these 2 gentlemen who hadn't been talking together found each other, and they said, oh my God, do you remember why we haven't been talking to each other? They had even forgotten. And they said, in the 6 minutes, they said, look, we need to get our act together. We're really hurting our team, hurting the organization. So they agreed to have breakfast the next morning, and they did. And what that did, it really opened up the team to have a much better, not only connection, but much better way of collaborating and collecting. So walk and talk, a very simple tool. Connections, one of the tools is tell stories. Often check in, another easy way to do it. At the collect level, it's, we say we're in the voice business. We're trying to collect everybody's voice. The people who want to say no, they need to be heard. And so we've given the metaphor here of a bee collecting honey, collecting the ideas. And it's a very important way to really make sure that we have everybody's voice. There's a number of ways to do it. We're going to use one of them this evening. It's called Stop, Reflect, Write, Report. A number of years ago, I was in France, a little town called Vézelay, with another company, and we were working on a project, and I was facilitating the team. And I said, okay, we're going to get into brainstorming to collect your ideas about this particular challenge. And Ron raised his hand and he said, Ernie, do you mind if we take maybe 10 minutes of silence? And each of us get on a flip chart and write our ideas down. And then we can go around and hear what we're thinking, and then perhaps have a brainstorming once we've individually had a chance to be heard. I said, Ron, sounds good, let's do it. There were 6 of us in the room. After 10 minutes, we had over 100 ideas collectively that we had collected. If we had done that brainstorming, we would have probably only had maybe 20 in the same amount of time. And it would have been probably very, very tedious to get somebody to write those 20 ideas down. So from then on, we adopted the concept of stop, reflect, write, report as a way to get everybody's voice. The introverts, I'm an introvert, needs time to think, needs time to reflect. And once we've written one idea, another one will come. So the writing is a critical part of the thinking process. And by doing that, we really get everybody's thinking so that when it comes time to share, it helps the extroverts really edit, and everybody is listening. We've got better ideas, and it's sort of a magic way of engaging people in a project. So collaborate, a critical part of the work. How do we work together? How do we work together in a team? How do we work together across teams? And this is very often where a lot of conflict comes. It can come also by poor contracting. You need to do that. But when you come together to collaborate, it's how do we work together? We need processes. For all of these steps, there are multiple processes that make things work. So it's the how that is really the critical part. The what and the why make absolute sense. Ayako, if you're trying to signal me, just say, Ernie, you got 2 or 3 minutes left. I'm not looking at my watch. So
Okay, you have 2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay, thank you. So collaborate, open space is a easy way to run a big meeting when you don't have, you're not clear on what to do by saying, okay, the topic is, let's each of us select a question and then let's come and work together. The idea of challenge is something that I think is really important. If we're going to continue to grow and learn, we need to be able to challenge one another. I was working with a leadership development program with one of the largest banks in Canada, and we were ready to take a decision, and we were using a tool called FIST 5. FIST means no way. 1, I can live with it, but don't expect a lot of work from me. 2, it's okay. I'll just finish the story, Ayako, and then we'll jump into it. 3, it's good. 4, it's great. 5, we must. And the gentleman who was proposing the decision said, okay, on the count of 3, let's see where we are. And they were all looking at each other, and all the hands went up. There were 4s and 5s and 1 fist. So he said, what's behind your fist? And the gentleman said, here's what I know that I just discovered this morning. The other said, thank you. He re-proposed the decision, and they all came up with 4s and 5s. So to be able to challenge something and to speak up and be able to say no is a critical skill that leaders need to have within their teams. I have run out of time. The theme what we're thinking of is create an environment in your team where it's, thank God, it's today. Ayaka, let me just take one more minute here to quickly share the underlying, the intel inside this new leadership paradigm. It's got to be relevant. So hopefully what I've been telling you is important to what you're saying. Self-awareness is a key part of the transformation. Reflection is one of the tools to be able to think. Shifting mindsets is the outcome. Knowing that we're all parts of different systems, physical, personal, functional. And that we're really looking at an integral perspective, heart, head, hands, and health. And the reinforcement, you don't get it unless you go from conscious awareness to unconscious mastery through practice, learning with and from each other, building on what we don't even know we know, our tacit knowledge, and having it facilitated. So these are the principles that bring to life the shared leadership disciplines. Now, I'm looking forward to some questions from our panelists. And then a little bit later, we'll hear questions from all of you. So those of you that are listening in your classrooms or wherever, please write down a question that may come to mind from this very brief, quick overview of shared leadership disciplines and the ARL principles. So let me stop here and turn it over to the panelists. Dr. Keith, I'm going to call on you first, if you don't mind. And
yeah, I'm happy to ask. I looked at your book, you know, the action, reflection, learning, and I was curious, where did that come from originally? That whole system of,
okay.
Is that?
Yeah, a good question. It came from Isabel, my wife. I met her in Sweden. She was
So did she
happened to
work
show
with
up.
Volvo? Did she work with Volvo? I looked to
No,
see that there was an MIL.
right. MIL Management in Lund is our
Yeah.
sister organization. And so I've been working with them over the last 25 years. I met them in 1995. And at the time, they invited me to start working with a number of their companies to join them. So LIM, Leadership in Motion, and MIL, the opposite letters going in different directions.
I was
Yeah.
noting that. I thought that was interesting. So these different principles you talked about are all from this ARL, Action Reflection Learning System, right?
Right. So it was action learning, and we discovered that, you probably know the Swedes are pretty reflective. They're quiet. I think people in the north slow down a lot. At any rate, we said, what is happening is that there's a lot of good reflection going on within that MIL community. So we said, let's put the R in to differentiate action learning from our approach at the time, which was action reflection learning. And when Isabel met me, she said, Ernie, what is action reflection learning? What does it stand for? And I said, well, if you reflect on what you've done, the chances are you're going to learn a little bit more. She said, I bet there's more to it than that. And I said, there probably is. She said, could I and a couple of my colleagues do some research and interview all of you and the MIL coaches to extract some learning principles? We both said yes, she did. And what I just showed you on the screen is a very quick picture of the result of that research that she's done.
Nice, nice. Do you know somebody called Shell Onhager? Have you ever come across Shell?
No.
Anyway, okay, it's okay. I was just thinking because he's in Sweden, does a lot of this. Have you worked at all with Agile coaches?
No, I haven't. Not by that name, Agile.
A lot of what you're saying sounds very similar to what my son does, which is Agile. Learning agility is a big part of that. And I just love the emphasis you put on learning as a critical part of this whole thing.
Right. No, I got into the learning. I say I'm a learner right now about learning. I was in the Peace Corps and I was teaching. I had the British syllabus, so I couldn't go far away from that British syllabus or I'd get spanked. And I said, but a lot of my students are never going to go to the university. A lot of them were dayaks, first generation, to actually go to school. Their fathers were headhunters. So I was consciously trying to add to the syllabus things that would be beneficial for them and looking at what's the difference between teaching and learning and training and learning. So learning has been something I've been very curious about.
And do you include habits as part of your program? I know that, in a lot of coaching, a lot of the changes, whether it's an individual or a team, come down to habits and how to change existing habits to more productive ones.
Right. So the disciplines are habits. We were debating, what do we call these? 5 habits? But, people have already adopted that name. So he said, let's talk about disciplines. And I think as a leader, we need to be disciplined around what we do and how we do it. So we identified, after a long search, 5 that I just shared with you, habits that we call disciplines, that if you apply them with the different tools, we have, maybe 40, 50 different tools and concepts that bring those habits, those disciplines to life. So very much the answer is yes.
Great. I don't want to, I can interact more later on, but if you want to move on to one of the other panelists, I'm happy to hold back a few questions and bring them up later.
I just want to say thank you to you. As I was checking you out, I didn't know who you were. I went to LinkedIn and realized your background in TM. And I think that's a critical part of connecting. How do we connect individually so we are in a position to connect with our teams and with our other colleagues? So thank you for that gift of forcing me to look. I've heard about it over the years for sure. And I do my own connecting through the piano. So when I heard the music at the beginning, I said, oh my God, this is wonderful, because I connect with my fingers to do my own reflection and I play with my eyes closed. So, there are different ways to connect, and TM is a wonderful one.
Well,
so
music is great because, an organization is like a symphony with all the different parts working together. And I think there's so much we could talk about, especially Maharishi's principles of coherence, because you've echoed those principles already, but they are really at the essence of everything Maharishi taught about individual performance, team performance, or organizational performance had to do with coherence, something we can talk more about later, but
Right.
it's a wonderful how the ideas overlap so beautifully.
Right. Just one other thing before we move to the next panel, as you talked about an orchestra or a symphony. I used to play the violin in an orchestra. And
Wow.
what I think this shared leadership goes, I think, a step further. It's more like a jazz ensemble where everybody knows the music, more or less the music.
Yeah.
And everybody knows his or her instrument, but we're really listening. Where can
Yeah.
I add on? When do I need to pull back? When do I need to, so it's really paying attention, not just to the script, to the score, but really listening to the others, which I think takes learning to a much greater or deeper level, depending on how you're looking at it. So we're looking a lot at just-in-time opportunities rather than the just-in-case.
There's fantastic research actually on that, on the brain. What happens during the brain, opposed to playing kind of scripted, as opposed to playing jazz. And there's amazingly different areas and circuits that are used in the brain when you have that more spontaneous, unscripted. So I think you're right. I think that's a very vital part of leadership, is having that spontaneity and adaptability. And it really does use entirely different brain circuits.
Yeah. So, so much in the brain going on that we need to continue to examine. Good.
Yeah, that's wonderful, guys. What a great dialogue. You're making my job so easy. So this is wonderful. Thank you for the wonderful transitions in this. I'd love to take the opportunity quickly to invite Dr. Laura Wagey to weigh in and see what questions she brought. But that was an amazing dialogue to kick off the conversation. So thank you so much, Keith and Ernie.
Thank you. Laura.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Turner, for can you hear me?
Ernie, please. Yeah, I'm Ernie.
Okay, Ernie. Yes, I'm European. I'm more formal, but yes, Ernie.
From Romania, probably, right?
I'm from Romania, and I heard you had some work in Romania with what you're doing. Can you tell me just a little bit about it?
Sure. Yeah. Somebody met us and attended one of our workshops in Brazil, and he was from Romania, and he said, Ernie, I've been a businessman running several businesses, and I want to run your business in Romania. So I went over and spent some time with him, and we were in Bucharest, and he was taking me from one place to another. And I said, where are we going? He said, well, we're almost here. I said, okay, but where are we going? He said, we're going to the #1 newspaper and TV station, and you're going to be interviewed in 5 minutes. I said, okay, thank you for letting me know. So we ended up, I didn't know this woman. She had done all the homework about me. And in the audience was the head of communications. And she heard about the work I had been doing in New York City with the school system and in Boston, which is really, how do you bring people together who have a stake, parents, teachers, principals, support staff, community, into the same room to say, it's not your school, it's not my school, it's our school, and then make that happen. And so she heard that story, and she came to me afterwards, and she said, Ernie, I'm not a mother yet, but when I am, I want my kids to be able to stay here and go to the Romanian schools. Can you help me now think through what we can do to bring some reform like you did in New York City to the Romanian school system? So we had dinner together. We did some planning. I came back several times and developed coaches. Like Ayako is going through our team coach certification program to actually work in the school system and then in companies to really make that idea of how you get the people who have a stake in a system to have a voice. So I won't say more than that, but it's a detailed but a very important system that I think needs to happen in schools everywhere. How do you make sure everybody's voice counts?
It does. It does. And I'm just going to share just a few things to emphasize how important this is, how you're doing, and where MIU's extraordinary approach to consciousness comes in. When I applied for the university in Romania, was still communism, and I had to memorize 2 books word by word.
Yeah.
That was the system, which was very challenging. Basically, I stood 2 years in the house from morning to night, memorizing those 2 books. When I finished memorizing, you had the entrance level was pretty much, you had to be perfect. If you had a A minus, you could fail. You had to have A plus to enter the law school. It was very difficult. Basically, 31 people fought for one place. 31 places, 1,000 candidates. It was brutal, the access. It took me 4 years to get into law school. So after the 2 years passed and I memorized the books, the East Berlin Wall fell and communism fell throughout East Europe. So then the books became obsolete, and there were 2 new books that were reissued, which I had to memorize 2 new books to go to law school. I was very persistent, as you can see, and the whole idea behind this was it really necessary? Did it help me to memorize 4 books, 4 years? I entered second on the list when I finally made it. But I think it was in some ways, but I don't think it really developed, like Dr. Keith said, all the areas in the brain that I needed at that time. However, it gave me an extraordinary ability in terms of memorizing and the ability to retain information. So when I came at MIU and learned Transcendental Meditation, I was exposed obviously to a different system of learning, you know, American school, consciousness-based education. I had to think outside of the box, right? Just don't repeat things that were in the books. And this is where everything that you and Dr. Wallace said comes so beautifully together, because our experience changes the brain. And you're talking about the habits. And we can get into certain habits of thinking, of learning, of memorizing, right? Of behaving. However, the fast changing business environment, it kind of pushes us to challenge ourselves and adapt to new patterns of thinking, of approaching things. We always get a new upgrade on the iPhone, on the iPad. So things are changing and you get annoyed. Gee, this is a new system. Do I have to think again how to operate it? But ultimately, I think that it really, it helps us and the students. We are all students of life, all of us, really to raise our mental capacity and emotional intelligence to new levels every day. This is it's a vast field that we can talk so much about it. And what TM showed is that as our coherence increases, when we meditate, when we do certain activities, the alpha coherence in our brains increases. And I think our mental abilities can increase to where they, you know, reach their full potential. As you know, everyone says we are only using 5% of our brain. Everybody saw the movie Lucy, where she started to use more and more of her abilities. I think it's a fascinating movie with Scarlett Johansson. Are you familiar with it, Ernie?
No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
Oh, you should see that movie. It will be a cool example for you to use, because it really ties up into everything you are discussing about.
That is so great. Thank you, Dr. Wagey, for sharing. And Ernie, if you want to make a quick remark on that, we'll come back to this, because I thought what a great way to transition to resilience and at the basis of the individual unit level, and the international perspective that we're capturing today is another thing that makes MIU so great. So I'd like to come back to that when we circle back with Q&A, but if you have any remarks, Ernie, if you could transition to Rapunjay, that would be awesome.
Yeah, just a quick comment, Laura. I think to your question, rhetorical question that you answered, does memorization help? I think it helps a lot. I think it really disciplines. It's for the mind to be able to memorize. And you've probably got a lot of tacit knowledge and skills that will still be important even through the process, even though the content may have changed. And I think your last comment is very true, that L has got to be equal or greater than ROC. And the L is learning. Learning
Yes,
has got
it
to
is.
be
And
greater than the rate of change. And that's why we have to continue every day. What am I going to learn today?
So that's the thing. What helped me is that I transitioned from law. When I came to MEM, I learned psychology and business, and then I went to international law at the University of Miami. So it really made my brain absorb 3 other different disciplines. So it does increases your ability to basically tap into other disciplines.
Right. So it goes from the head, the brain, to the heart, the feeling, to the hands, the doing, and the health, which is really, we're in the 4-H business, really looking at the health, not only of our organization, but the health of the world. So we've got a lot on our hands.
And
yeah.
the mind and heart, and I'll finish with this until we get to speak again. Mind and heart are so connected in everything we do, business-wise, social-wise, educational-wise. Dr. Robert Boyer, who is an eminent professor at MIU, wrote the book, Cool Mind, Warm Heart, and how important is the process of interpersonal communication skills throughout the whole process.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's great.
Back to you, Laura.
All right,
Or back to
Rapunjay.
you, Megan. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Rapunjay.
So the thing which I found very fascinating is the first point which you started with is to connect.
Yeah.
It's all about how you connect. And then there's an element of awareness you have brought. You were talking about relevance, awareness, reflection. And then I was just wondering about how do you see these 2 elements when you say, because when I was like pondering when you shared, I was just thinking that it's the awareness is has a direct correlation with whom and how and to what level we will connect.
Right.
So, and then the awareness, and when the person's awareness changes, the way he will connect and to what level he will connect. So I was just wondering, have you ever thought about, and do you have any comments on this particular part? I just found very fascinating, these 2 elements when I heard from you.
Yeah, well, the story I gave with Ramesh, the Indian leader of that team, he was very open to it. He said, you know, Ernie, I think you're right. If we don't get to know each other as human beings, I'm coming into this company with assumptions about who's here. They're coming in certainly with a lot of assumptions that are really based on fear, because 3 people had already lost their job. He brought in the head of sales and the head of marketing and himself. And so the others have started saying, am I next? So that was getting in the way of them talking at all about the new strategy. So they had to get to know him and vice versa. So we took time going around the circle where everybody could tell their story, and maybe take 15, 20 minutes each. And then based on that, have a dialogue. What are we learning about ourselves? So you're right. It begins at maybe the tip of the iceberg and what we can see and hear, but we ask questions that allow us to go deeper and share more about ourselves. And the deeper you go in sharing, the more you're going to connect and have a richer opportunity. Teams that really stick together are really connected. Those that are don't take the time, even in a meeting, every meeting you can connect. We take time at every meeting for, we call it a check-in. Somebody has a question that allows us to look at something, you know. What was a memorable moment at the age of 5? Everybody goes back 5. Okay, I haven't been there for a long time. But remember that moment and share it. And so I get to know Willie's 5-year-old experience, which gets me closer to Willie. And I've been working with him for 20 years. So I think you're absolutely right. The more time you take connecting, the more you learn, appreciate who's around the table. So when it comes to listening to a different point of view, you can accept it easier because now you know who Willie really is, that he really is good intention. So I can start to put away some of those assumptions that are saying, I'm not going to listen to Willie anymore because now I know Willie better. Yeah.
So there's a point which I was thinking that if we start to observe, like, let's say when I'm listening stories that somebody is talking, like when he or she shares a story, it's more intellectual type or maybe emotional type or related to like to a community or a strong connection to a particular community. And it's always different, like different people when share a story, they share it differently with a different message. And that's what I was saying, when the awareness, or I was wondering about this particular part, when I'm listening, let's say 5 or 10 or 20 or 30 people, then slowly I start to see, the bent of this particular person maybe is more intellectual or
Right.
emotional or more analytical or like different.
Right.
And then if I'm aware that, okay, this is different, and connecting on all these different levels with different people at the same time. And for that, I was wondering that one need to really be aware that, okay, what level the connection is happening. And that was just a thought.
You know, as leaders in a team or facilitators or whoever's running it can actually influence what people talk about. Questions are so powerful. You can say, okay, we're going to share on these 3 questions today, and actually give the questions that will allow everybody to go at whether it's a heart kind of connection or a head kind of connection, if it's related to business or it's related to profession. So questions we ask drive how we think, and then obviously what we say. So we have an opportunity to start influencing the kind of conversations by being a little more specific in the questions we ask. And we've collected over 100 questions, just check-in questions that can take us in different, from a very personal or early kid to where do you go for help? Where do you go for help mentally? Where's your own little reflection spot? And it's a wonderful way to be able, as leaders, to start to help people really connect with each other. One of the things that I read about you is that you're doing a lot of work with conflict resolution, and so much of the work that we do as well is related to conflict. And for some of the reasons, people haven't done a very good job contracting, getting agreements, but that keeps us in business for sure. Is to what are the simple processes that can help people really connect and get good contracts so they can start to collaborate. And one of the things that we've discovered is so simple. It's offers and requests. Mm-hmm. So when people are not working very well together, I say, would you like some help? And most often they do. And so I said, before I help the 2 of you talk, why don't you take some time to reflect and write down what are the requests I have of the other and what are the offers I have to the other. And then you come prepared, having both thought about it, and then we can hear one's offer, the other's request, to see if they, number 1, understand it, and number 2, are willing to say yes. And if not, why not? How could it be adjusted? So that simple offers and requests can do an awful lot to help us in whatever situation we're in, whether it's personal, professional, teams, between teams, within a business setting. And even I bet it right now, this afternoon at COP26, they're trying to get final requests and offers nailed down to get agreements. And so just coming prepared, having thought through offers and requests can be a wonderful way to do that. All right.
That was an amazing dialogue, between the 2 of you. I noted in all of these interactions, Ernie, how well you mirrored the energy and of your participants. And I think that the fact that you were able to do that makes you a great listener. And each of the panelists today asked very dynamic, different questions from their perspective and point of view. So it was an awesome opportunity to see that in play. There is, we're a little bit of a time crunch because the dialogue has been so good. So Ernie, I've been asked and prompted to maybe start the reflection period where we have the students actually participate in this notion of reflecting on some of the dialogue and content you shared today. So stop me if I'm wrong or chime in, but it sounds like we'd like all the participants and students to just take a minute and stop and reflect and write down in the chat what your reflective takeaway was and any other key points you'd like to share with Ernie so we can see this in practice today. So if everybody could just take a minute or so and do that, and Ernie, feel free to add any additional points to what you'd like to see after that if you'd like.
You've said it perfectly, Megan. SRWR in action right now, 1 minute of silence while everybody writes a question, and then just put it onto chat. And that can be from panelists as well. Ten seconds. So why don't you hit chat and we'll get the questions. Okay, Katie has a question on the last two slides. Actually, I could do that and take just one more minute, Katie, while a couple other questions are coming in. So let me do that. And then keep the questions coming, and then I will answer those. So Megan, if you could help me read some of the questions, and then I will.
Yeah, absolutely. We're collecting those now, and if you just want to take to close up, Ernie, maybe what we can do would be wonderful for you to just add these kind of final points in the last 2 minutes. We'll collect the questions and provide contact information so we could maybe dive a little
Right.
deeper. It seems like that might be a good opportunity for us to do that before Dr. Keith closes the session for us.
Okay, so let me just say something about relevance. What you're doing right now by writing questions is the easiest and probably the best way to find out what are you really interested in. What's the question? Not the topic, but what's the question? The question will give us a little more specific around what part of leadership or what part of learning are you really interested in. And awareness, if we don't really learn until we're aware of what we have to do. Like Laura, when she was aware that she was competing with a whole lot of other people for one spot, that awareness really perked her energy and focus on memorizing. The whole notion of reflection is to pause and say, so what do I think? And that's what you're doing right now, those of you that are still writing a question. What is it that I want to know? So by reflecting and being quiet, that can happen. I was speaking in Brazil at the Alumni Association, the #1 university, and I was told, Ernie, you have 90 minutes. If you could reserve 5 minutes for Q&A. And I said, why just 5? And they said, well, they don't speak that much here in Brazil. So I smiled and I said, okay. So after 15 minutes, I stopped talking like today. And I said, would you take 2 minutes? And on the back of your chair, you'll find a Post-it. They all turned around, found a Post-it. And I said, take 2 minutes and write a question. And they looked at me. And I could see the dean having a heart attack. I didn't look at him directly. 2 minutes later, I said, who has a question? Every hand went up. The remaining time, the remaining hour and 15 minutes, we're answering questions. So reflection is a wonderful way to get at the relevance. The paradigm shift is really helping people change the way they look at the world, the way they look at themselves, relationships. And that's our business as learners, as teachers, is to help people shift their paradigm. The systems are all around us. I won't go into that. And the integral is another system, the head, heart, gut, hands, our overall health. And reinforcement is all about practice and reinforcing so that learning continues. It's if you don't reward and reinforce, it won't happen. And looking for social learning, we have sort of at the beginning of a meeting, after lunch, I'll say we call it incidental insights. Before we get started, did anything come up over lunch or the night before that you would like to share with the larger group? Invariably, wonderful insights come up from that. We'll do a little social learning at the very end here. Tacit knowledge is, how do you get what you don't know? You ask people to pause again, to reflect. Reflection is a key here to really increase the learning. And then as facilitators or team coaches, to know the skills, to be able to actually introduce some of the things that I told you about tonight. So
Wonderful.
That's it.
Oh, that's so great, Ernie. Thank you. Thank you so much. We have time really for one question from the group. And then the rest of them we can facilitate via email, because there's so many great questions and a lot of engagement. So really pleased to see that from the group today. Great universal learning happening. But I'm going to take and kind of create a question from the several I took from my classmates in a course we're taking right now called Difficult People and Difficult Conversations.
Right.
And in this class, there are a lot of aspirational, transformational coaches. Many of the students in this class do intend to take their learnings from this course and from the leadership and conflict resolution program into the professional world to transform organizations as you have. Could you speak to that a little bit as a new transformational coach, maybe taking off in today, maybe some best practices, or how to approach a new client base when you're coming forward with something kind of unique and different in this space? I think some of the students would love to hear about that. And then what we'll do is wrap up with your reflection, the sort of final ratings and the reflection, and we'll move to Dr. Wallace for some final remarks. Thank you.
Okay, just a quick comment. I want to thank you all for your questions. And although I'm not going to have time in this short time to answer them all, I will collect them all and send some answers so that all of you get the benefit of not only the questions, but my thinking, knowing that there are a lot of other answers that could be also added. So to the question that you raised there, Laura, in terms of becoming a transformational coach to be able to work with clients, as I understand, the essence of the question is, how can I be best prepared? How can I get ready? What do I need to know? What do I need to do in order to get the skills to be able to sit confidently in front of a team, with a team, and help them move from one step to the other? I think probably Ayako could answer that question best, and at some point grab her and ask her that question. But I think a lot of it's knowledge. You have to know a little bit about teams and how teams work. You need to know, what makes them tick, what turns them off. And I think these 5 disciplines can really help you as a transformational coach. First, help them connect. It doesn't take much to help people start talking about who am I. A few questions allows everybody to share some common questions, as Rupunja and I were discussing. And then once you've done that, you can help them on some of the skills, helping them contract, setting norms. What are the rules of engagement in our team? How are we going to work together? Team leader contracting. Very often teams and team leaders have never had a conversation. What do you expect of me? And what can you count on from me? So by able to have that kind of a conversation. So knowing the tools around these 5 C's is a wonderful way for you as to be coaches, to be facilitators, to really be able to learn. And you can take it into the classroom. I think everything I'm talking about is as good for teachers as it is for coaches, because we're really in the voice business as well. How do we ensure that everybody in this classroom is able to speak up? We can do that. We can design classroom settings where people feel connected and the time goes by very quickly. So I know I don't have a lot of time, but I think if you would go around those, you could do that. By the way, on the last slide that I didn't talk about, there's a couple websites you can go to that I have, and you'll get the slide deck. So if you want to dive deeper, and we are running team coach certification programs, and we have some professors in there. Ayako isn't the only one that is saying, what can I learn around team coaching that I could apply to learning in a classroom setting? So if you're interested in learning more about becoming a team coach, by all means, we welcome you into our next session, and there's a reference there for that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ernie. I know that'll add a lot of value, and the follow-up questions will definitely add some additional color to that for those students that did that. So I appreciate everybody's contributions to that today. And now, Ernie, you can, I know I'll try to capture it the way you like, but I think you had a really effective way of checking in with everybody that attended and took time to listen in live today to maybe give a rating on the value they received from the discussion today on a scale of 1 to 10, and maybe write a top takeaway. Did I capture that correctly? And we'll do that over about a minute or so.
Feedback, and let me just preface it, Megan, feedback is such a wonderful gift, and I need it all the time, and I ask for it. A good way to get it is to ask for it. Sometimes people want to give it, and you're afraid to ask for it because you have an idea what it's going to say, what it's going to sound like. But I think appreciative and generative feedback in terms of what I could do differently next time. I make a lot of these talks. So if you could share with me Number one on a scale of 0 to 10, like this was a waste of your time, to 10, wow, it really exceeded expectations, and why? If you could say why, and also if you could write down one thing you're taking away. By all of us writing that down, it becomes our meeting, and we collectively learn. So we can learn what somebody else took away and say, oh my God, yeah, I can take that away too. So if you could take just maybe 90 seconds, give a number on the rating and the value of today's meeting. You invested an hour on Saturday, why it was valuable, and one thing you're taking away. And as soon as you're finished, hit send. We'll just take a quick look at them, and you'll get the copy of chat as well. So you get a copy of the chat, you get a copy of my slides, and I'll be quiet. 90 seconds of silence again for a stop, reflect, write, report to get feedback. Forty seconds to go. Okay, thank you. If you don't mind hitting chat, and then I think all of us can read faster than I can read to you. So just take a look at what people have written, and this will give us a real quick sense of what we learned today.
Amazing. Well, I really appreciate everybody doing that. Dr. Wallace, I'd love to turn it back over to you for final remarks, and wanted to thank everybody from the MIU student team and group that participated today. And thanks to all of our wonderful panelists, and again to Ayako and Viola for helping facilitate this today, and for everyone for attending. So thank you, Dr. Wallace, and we look forward to hearing your final remarks. Oh, you're on mute. You are on mute, sorry.
Okay, thank you. I'd give it 10. And the reason why is because I think you are a sincere, giving, and wonderful human being. I think you practice what you preach. Everything I heard you speak about was so good, so full of life, so full of caring for other people, full of compassion. You're very service oriented. And I love that. I love to see people who are in the service of the whole world. I think at MIU, if we can capture you some more, we would love to give you what you can give us an enormous amount of knowledge, so many skills, so many disciplines, and we could give you something too. I love the point about connect. I study connections in the brain. The brain doesn't work very well unless things are connected. And the more you connect, the more powerful you are. And that was the great secret knowledge that Maharishi Mahesh Yogi gave us all. He taught us a very specific and easy technique, and I hope you learn it someday because you already are interested in it, to create those connections in your brain. I think knowledge is structured in consciousness. That was Maharishi's expression. You are full of consciousness. You exude consciousness. And what we do every day, twice a day, when we meditate, is to expand our consciousness, expand the conscious mind. We want 200% of life, so 100%, all the skills, all the learning, all your amazing tools are so valuable for us. The other 100% is just creating more connections in the brain, rewiring the brain so you have an expanded consciousness And then literally everything you do is improved. More energy, more happiness, more self-esteem. Everything in your life gets improved. So thank you for all that you've given us. And if we can give you something, get you to learn TM, come to our university, we would love it. You are an amazing human being. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you very much. I would love to come. I'll take you up on your offer. And, you know, Ayako has a way of getting things done. So she's listening in. She'll figure out how to make it happen. I would love to come and see you in person and everybody else. So I want to thank you and Megan and Viola and Rapunjay and Laura to really make this happen for me. And by the way, the last 5 minutes, what we've done, that feedback is a wonderful learning technique. And it really helps people adjust to what can I do in the next meeting. So for me, I look forward to reading all of this. So go in peace and hope to see you again. To be continued.
Amazing. Thanks to everyone so much. Thanks to our fantastic panelists, Rapunjay and Laura and Keith. We're so grateful for you. I hope everyone has a wonderful and amazing weekend. We'll send you a recap with a copy of the recording and any other follow-up that Ayako may have from today. And Ernie, thank you so much. We really, really appreciate your time and contribution to our departments. Thank you so much.
If you could send me the chat today, Megan, I can work on it this afternoon. Okay, thanks.
Will do.
See you all.
We'll make it happen. Absolutely.
Okay.
Cheers, everyone.
Thank-
Enjoy your weekend.